Today's Q&A is about insects. And the person's question was, I'm not looking for instructions on how to check my vegetables and to clean them. I just want some background, the main issues relating to insects. So let's try to answer that. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat bugs. So before we get to what most people think about, some of the unexpected things that are actually bugs, I'm going to mention a couple. I hope I pronounce them correctly. Apis mellifera, which is it's a bee, and it's used in homeopathic remedies. Mucin, which is called a snail secretion filtrate, or SSF. A cheetah powder, which is ground up crickets. Carmine, which is a kind of beetle used for coloring. And lubricanase, which is an earthworm. Okay, so those are actual insects. They go by these names that don't, at first glance, mean it's obvious that it's an insect. So we should just be aware that sometimes these unusual sounding things are actually insects. But for most people, they think about insects is that there are fruits and vegetables and herbs that are infested with these small insects. Meaning, that is to say, I never saw a bug in my particular head of lettuce. I pick up a head of lettuce or a container of strawberries. I don't see bugs in there right now. But from experience, we know that it's common that there will be insects in these kinds of foods. There are three classifications for how these foods could be, how we could look at these dinim. One is that if more than half of the food will be infested of this type of food, then we assume that there are insects there. It's called muchzik b'toim. It's assumed that there are bugs in there, and it's asur midaraisa to eat it unless you get rid of the bugs. That's the most serious case. A step down from that is a situation where it's common that there are insects in this thing. It's matzui, it's miyud hamatzui. It's common. It's a meaningful minority of these foods will have bugs in them, but it's less than half the times. So midrabanan, I have to clean it or check it before I eat the food. And the lowest category is it's really unusual for there to be insects in this food. Then you can eat it without any checking at all. No cleaning or checking at all is necessary. Okay, now. Sometimes it becomes important to know whether it's muchzik, which was the most significant amount of infestation, or just miyud hamatzui. For example, what happens if by mistake I cook the food and without checking it? Then again, it might make a difference whether it was muchzik or just the miyud hamatzui. And also it's relevant to decide if I want to, let's say, make a smoothie without checking the food. Again, that one factor in making that decision is whether is this kind of food muchzik b'tolim, more than half the time it has bugs, or just miyud hamatzui, just common. So to know the answer about a specific food, you have to speak to your rabbi or your local vad to understand halachic issues that go into deciding if something is muchzik or miyud hamatzui, and also the practical information about a specific food or herb, or whether that food is which category it fits into. Now, another halachic issue is that everyone agrees that microscopic insects are permitted, and the Torah doesn't forbid you from eating those microscopic beings. But there are differences of opinion about which little insects are big enough that they're considered visible. I mean, they're not microscopic, and that they're asur. Okay, so there's different opinions about that. Some say that the insect has to be identifiable. That if you look at it without any magnification, you could identify that this thing is a bug. Other people say, no, you don't have to be able to identify it. As long as you could see it, that's enough. Even it might take magnification, a loop, a little magnifier to figure out that it's an insect. But if you could see it, then that's considered not microscopic, and then it's asur. Okay, so again, there's different opinions about that. And there's also a difference of opinion about whether that decision about whether something is visible or not, or identifiable, should be made by an average person, or it should be made by someone who has been trained to see and identify the insects. Okay, so people who take a stricter stance on these questions will end up thinking that certain foods will be infested, that other people would not consider to be infested, or they'll think certain foods are muchzik b'tolim, and other people will say they're only miyud hamatzui. Again, because if there are 14 bugs in here, but we disagree about 5 of them, well then I think there's 9, and I think that there's 14. So people have different views on that. That might make a difference into how to classify it. Okay, and of course that then plays out into how do I wash and clean the specific vegetable based on how infested I believe it is. Okay, one last thing related to herbs, and that is the din is very clear that after 12 months, an insect dries out to the point that it's like dust and it becomes mutter. The Chacham Sadin says that the same thing is true if it was dried out in less than 12 months, but you did it with heat, like you stuck it into an oven. And that's why the hashgacha will certify the dried herbs that most people use in their kitchens. They're dried out with heat in an oven-like device, and therefore those are permitted. Now, some people say the same is true if herbs are freeze-dried. Freeze drying is a complex process that uses very little heat, but uses a vacuum. And some will say the same applies there also. Now, this kula of drying out does not apply to frozen herbs, and that's because freezing kills bugs, but the bug kills also. Just because it's dead doesn't make a difference. And second is, freezing doesn't dry out the insect or cause it to disintegrate. Rather, it keeps them going. So frozen herbs need hashgacha to make sure that there are no bugs in them.